Pita bread, or pocket bread as it's also known, is a fun bread variation that when paired with even somewhat ordinary food seems to elevate both the bread and the filling to a more enjoyable taste experience. Making pita bread is a lot easier than it may seem at first. In a lot of ways it's much easier than making even a typical loaf of bread. I think if you took just about any ball of dough, flattened it out, and tossed it on a hot baking stone, there's a decent chance it would puff up and form a pocket bread. But there are a couple things you can do to help ensure success every time that I'll cover in this video. The simple recipe I'm using makes 8 pita breads, which when cut in half can make 16 pita pocket sandwiches. For the fun of it, I'm going to split this recipe in half and make 4 sourdough leavened pitas and 4 instant yeast leavened pitas. You can copy or print the recipe details off our website, so I won't be going into the quantity details here in this video. I make pitas with 100% whole grain flour. It's healthy, it tastes great, and it works. And the bread is thin enough that it won't overpower whatever filling I'm using in the pita pockets. Now this happens to be heirloom organic turkey red wheat, which is the predecessor to modern red wheat. But you can use the common whole wheat flour found in any grocery store. So this is going to be my sourdough leavened pita, and this is going to be my instant yeast leavened pita. So for the instant yeast, I'm going to mix that in with the flour, and the salt goes in there too. So the dry ingredients get combined on this one. And then the only difference for this sourdough leavened pita is the sourdough goes in place of the instant yeast, but that goes directly into the water. And then the salt goes in the flour. And then the dry ingredients just get stirred into the water, in this case the water sourdough starter mixture. This is a fairly stiff dough, so at some point you can only go so far with the whisk, and then you can just do the rest by hand. Once I get the ingredients well incorporated, then I'm just going to cover it for a little while and then move on to the instant yeast leavened pita bread mix. They're pretty small batches, so I can use a pretty small bowl. So that's well combined. So what I'm going to do now is just let them both rest for about 10 minutes to let the flour fully absorb the water. Only guess what? I forgot to put in the olive oil. So rather than reshoot the entire video, I'm going to do that now. It's really important that you put in about this is a half a tablespoon of olive oil in each one. The olive oil will soften the dough, because what you want is for the pita bread to be pliable when you're stuffing it with food, so it doesn't crack and fall apart. It'd be a lot easier if I'd add this to the water at the very beginning, but alas, I forgot. So I'm just going to knead it in now. This will get kneaded a few more times before I'm done, so it'll be well incorporated by then. Now for pita bread you want good gluten development, so again the bread doesn't fall apart when you go to put food in the pockets. So you want to knead it well, and so you can knead it for several minutes, or you can do what I almost always do, and that's a series of brief kneadings with a 15-minute or so rest in between, and that accomplishes the same thing. You might want to keep some water handy to dip your fingers in so the dough doesn't stick to them. So that's more than a sufficient amount of kneading if you're doing the so-called stretch and fold method. I'll do the same thing for this one. Okay, so this is the third and final short kneading period before I let the dough proof for quite a few hours. So even for a whole grain bread, the dough should start to take on a little bit of a silky sheen ideally. And I think it's starting to happen a little bit. After you're done kneading the dough, you're going to let it do its long fermentation, which at room temperature is going to be around 8 to 10 hours. Well, I started this recipe in the late afternoon. 8 to 10 hours from now puts it somewhere in the middle of the night, which doesn't work for me. So what I'm going to do is let it sit out for about an hour, then I'm going to pop it in the fridge for about 2 hours, and then take it out before I go to bed. That should slow the fermentation down enough so that it's ready for the next step at a more reasonable time tomorrow morning. If I had started this recipe in the morning, then it would be ready to finish in the evening. Or if I'd started it later in the evening, it would be ready the following morning. So sometimes you have to play around with retarding the dough by using the refrigerator to slow things down to make it work out for your schedule. Okay, it's the next morning and we're ready to divide and roll out our pita dough. The oven stone is in the oven and it's preheating to the highest temperature the oven will go, which is 525 degrees in this case. As you can see, the dough has risen quite a bit. It's been over 15 hours since we left it, and even with its stint in the fridge, it's probably overproofed. That would be a problem perhaps if this were a regular loaf of bread, but this is flat bread, and overproofing or underproofing isn't as big a deal. And this is one of the things that makes making pita bread easier. Let's start with the sourdough. We're going to divide the dough into 4 equal balls. And the total weight of the dough is 474 grams. So what's that? About 120, not quite, grams each. Okay, so we have 4 balls that are 117, 118, 117, 116. So now we're going to roll them up into kind of a tight ball. And this is where you have to dust the counter pretty liberally because the dough is pretty sticky. And we're going to roll them out using this nifty rolling pin from J.K. Adams. It has these knobs at the end which allow for exactly an 1/8 inch spacing between the rolling pin and the counter. So I'm rolling them out to an 1/8 inch thick, but they're going to spring back a little bit after I'm done rolling them out. So the final thickness is going to be somewhere between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, which is just about right for pita bread. And then they're going to go on to a well-floured cookie sheet, which is going to become our peel when we're loading the pitas into the oven. So here's one cookie sheet with the sourdough pitas on it. And I'm going to cover this and let it rest for 15 minutes. And I'm going to cover it with a slightly dampened cloth so they don't dry out. And I'm going to do the same with the commercially yeasted dough. This ball is going to not weigh quite as much as the sourdough ball because the sourdough adds extra weight. This is 447 grams, so that works out to, what, 112 grams per ball. So we've got our 4 dough balls weighed out evenly. So we'll repeat the same procedure for these. Okay, so here are the 4 instant yeast leavened pitas, and we'll cover them with a damp cloth as well. And in a couple of minutes, we'll put the other ones into the oven. Before we slide these into the oven, you want to make sure that they're loose on the cookie sheet, because even within 15 minutes, they'll start to stick to the pan, even though it's well floured. So you want to make sure they're going to slide off onto the pizza stone without any problem. So we'll loosen them up and just give it a shake and make sure they're going to slide. So they're ready to go into the oven. And first batch goes into the oven. Now within about 2 minutes they'll start to puff up. You can see them start to bubble now. After they're done puffing up, I'm going to give them about another 4 minutes, so there'll be about a total of 6 minutes bake time before I take them out of the oven. After 6 minutes, they're ready to come out of the oven. After they come out of the oven, I'll stack them so they flatten. And then I'll cover them with the same cloth so that they stay moist and pliable. They'll flatten under their own weight after a bit. Now to the second batch, we'll loosen them to make sure they slide off the cookie sheet. Doesn't hurt to put a little extra flour underneath them. Give it a shake to make sure they're loose, and into the oven. And again, within 2 minutes they start to puff up, and these are almost fully puffed. Then we'll give them 4 more minutes to finish baking. Okay, now these are done. This one didn't puff up all the way, but it'll still be fine. That happens sometimes. And before they cool completely, I'll do the same thing where I'll stack them and cover them with a towel. You can see them flatten out before your very eyes. So here's our finished product, the sourdough. And the instant yeast version. Can you see the difference? Yeah, neither can I. They both look and feel the same. Of course, the sourdough pita is going to taste quite a bit different with its sour tang. Now they're ready for whatever you want to put in them. As far as fillings go, falafel with tahini sauce is of course a pretty common match. One of my favorite things is to stuff them with mixed salad greens with a vinaigrette dressing. Especially nice is a Greek salad with cucumber, feta cheese, Kalamata olives, cherry tomatoes. It's awesome. And you can put pizza sauce and pizza toppings inside and heat them up until the cheese melts. How about use them in place of a soft taco shell or a burrito wrap to make a Middle Eastern Mexican treat? For breakfast, I'll often toast them. They get kind of crunchy, but you can still spread nut butter and jam inside. It's good stuff. Give them a try with whatever you think sounds good. Have fun. Enjoy.